either just after Mercury turns to direct motion or much later. Mercury retrograde periods would not be good times to do anything involving communication, such as launch a magazine, website, or an advertising or publicity campaign, and it seems also a podcast, particularly the Electric Eye Radio Show. But we've gone ahead and done that anyway, So these phases are also considered poor times to launch any endeavors, even if they are not related to the communication industries. Similarly, a retrograde period is not a good time to sign any contracts or even to shake hands on any new agreements. Do not close on a house during this time, nor sign a lease. Verbal agreements are considered the same as written ones. The environment will be quite fluid and changeable, no matter what you are told or what you think. Hence, Mercury having a mercurial nature, in the sense that everything is very indecisive at this moment. Making deals, trying to get anything done, it's going to be a lot harder, apparently. So, but you're still going to have to do things. You're still going to have to function in life. So, the message of this particular section of this podcast is going to be just to be prepared. Know what you're getting into. Know what you can try to hold off on, and maybe what you can do in the meantime to kind of protect yourself or your best interests. So then the article also continues on to say, it's not the people you're dealing with are necessarily duplicitous. It's just that nobody can fully predict what conditions will be like later. If you start a new job, it won't necessarily be the position you thought it was when you accepted it. If you are a manager, you will have difficulty choosing the right candidate for the job. So if you can hold off hiring anyone, if you buy a house, problems could crop up later that were completely unanticipated. So those are some of the pitfalls involved with this particular planet being in retrograde. Now, it's important to remember that it's not just Mercury that goes into retrograde, and if you do a quick study of the planetary influences of astrology, you would understand that when, say, for instance, when Mars goes retrograde, it's not going to be a good time for winning, competition. Also, decisiveness is going to be strange. Confrontation is going to be kind of off the chain. Athleticism, those types of things, are not going to be at their peak or what you're used to. So just keep that in mind, that other planets also go into retrograde. And it just seems to be that there's a lot of focus on Mercury retrograde because it's become such a buzzword. Here's some more things, according to this article. Do not have plastic surgery or other elective surgery when Mercury, Venus, and Mars are retrograde. Of course, if you have an emergency, you must have surgery. At other times in life, we do have a choice about when to schedule an operation or procedure. In those cases, such as having plastic surgery, it is best to avoid Mercury retrograde periods. These are periods where mistakes are more prone to happen than at other times, or when judgment is off. Your surgeon is under the same conditions as you, so I would suggest waiting. I would also strongly suggest that you would avoid plastic surgery when Venus retrogrades, because Venus rules beauty, and the whole purpose of the surgery is to improve your looks. Mars rules the whole area of surgery, so you would ideally want Mars to be in the best possible form. Also, it is said not to have an operation on the part of the body that the sign Mars is moving through rules. For example, if Mars happens to be in Capricorn, it would not be the best time for a knee operation, because Capricorn rules the knees. It is said that Mars will increase pain and swelling. A full moon at the time of surgery will increase bleeding. We do the best we can. Again, let me reiterate, or iterate, if you have an emergency, don't worry about any of these rules. Have your surgery. I had to have very serious surgery, triggered by a new moon solar eclipse on the wrong part of the body, because Mars is in the sign ruling the part of the body that was being affected by the surgery. Admittedly, it was a tough surgery, but it was highly successful. If you need surgery, have it. So once again, make your own decisions. Just use this information as a way to prepare yourself and to just kind of arm yourself with potential knowledge. A little bit more about the pitfalls of Mercury retrograde. What other specific things should you watch out for? Since Mercury rules the mail and the conveyance of information, be extra careful when sending important documents. If you send faxes, be sure to call the people at the other end to let them know your documents are waiting for them. Otherwise, they may never see it. If you work in an office and have to photocopy an important document, be sure to retrieve the original. Be equally careful about whom you send email to. You don't want to send a private email to the wrong person or have a sensitive email forwarded to others. So it almost seems like Mercury retrograde is a time of the coyote or the trickster. It's really possible for you to, get caught with your pants down or really embarrass yourself. So you just want to be a little extra cautious. Another example of how Mercury retrograde seems to have affected my life is just earlier today I had set up an appointment with a leasing office to go check out a new tri-level townhome that we're planning on moving in next year. And at the time that I called these guys, they said that there were several models open to be viewed and that wouldn't be any problem. And I had already gone and scouted out the location beforehand, but I was taking my wife along with me this time so she could get the feeling of it. And when we got there, we went to one of the locations that we were supposed to scout, and it wasn't the exact one that we were looking at, but when we were there, one of the apartment managers was in the building, and they were kind of chastising the representative who had taken us in there because they hadn't finished remodeling the area or the building. So, and that also led to us not being able to see the model of the actual apartment that we wanted to lease. So we had this glass half full kind of experience during our walkthrough. Once again, expect delays. Try to avoid aggravation on top of the general frustration of things not working out, because that will just get way blown out of proportion, because you won't even be able to potentially communicate this properly to the people around you, and they might take it completely wrong. They might completely understand that your frustration doesn't lie with them, because who knows what happened to them that day that they haven't even talked to you about. It's the little things that make you crazy. Here's a handy truth about Mercury retrograde. Things are in flux, but you don't know they are yet. When Mercury retrogrades, think of it as an instant signal that the wind is changing direction. Something is in flux up on the road ahead, but the problem is everything looks the same and unchanging. What makes these periods so difficult is that you cannot see yet that they are about to change, often radically. So here we are at a point where everything's looking good, everything's looking normal, everything's looking straight ahead, and you start making decisions. You move into a new job, you buy a new property, you get a new boyfriend, girlfriend, what have you. And then as soon as this sign goes direct, everything changes and it becomes what it actually was before you made these decisions. So it's almost like you can't see what's happening at the time that it's happening, but as soon as Mercury wakes back up, you realize that maybe these weren't the best ideas, or hey, maybe it was a really good idea. It just really depends, because it can work both ways. You might decide against doing something that was actually very beneficial and then come to realize that later, which of course is a real pain in the ass. Another important aspect of Mercury retrograde that is often overlooked is what element the retrograde lies in at the time that it's occurring. So each year, Mercury will favor one element over another. In 2012, Mercury has retrograded through fire signs. So that tells us we need to apply completely new visionary and innovative solutions to the problems that come up. Fire signs are highly creative and also brave and pioneering. Don't be shy about suggesting a very unusual solution during the time that Mercury retrograde is going through a fire sign. Fire signs also think on a big, broad scale, so you should think that way when attacking the problem too. So just become aware, like I've suggested. Know what it is that you're dealing with. If Mercury retrograde is in an earth sign, which it is right now, Be very practical about finding a solution and strictly adhere to limits of time or budget. Money often plays a big part of both the problem and the answer when Mercury is in retrograde. You would probably do best by not suggesting a blue sky idea, which would have marked with Mercury, which would have worked better with Mercury in a fire sign. If Mercury retrograde is in an air sign, lots of discussion will need to take place, as air signs are highly communicative. Talk to a lot of people and pull the responses. Do a great deal of research too. Air signs are analytical and modern. You may hear of a solution that is so new you may not even have known it was possible. Use the answers that seem best for you after going through this process, and make sure you are objective and not emotional in choosing your answer. So at this time, in an air sign, you need to think intellectually. In the time of a earth sign, you need to be a little more organized, and you need to be a little more practical. And the time that Mercury retrogrades through a fire sign, you need to be expansive, and you need to be a little bit more brave. So if Mercury retrogrades in a water sign, use your intuition. Search can be driven by the way questions are asked. So if your research says to go to a certain way, but your intuition tells you to reject the research, follow your gut. Intellect can only get us so far. Often our emotional intelligence is more accurate. If Mercury retrogrades in a water sign, it is an instant signal to start listening to the small voice within. So at this period of time, of course, listen to yourself. Feel your gut reactions and give yourself a little bit more credit. Like, what happens if you were born under Mercury retrograde, at the time that Mercury was going into retrograde? It has been said by some astrologers that people who were born under Mercury retrograde are immune from much of the mayhem of this phase, but I do not agree that this is true. I was born while Mercury was retrograde. This author and I were both born during the time that Mercury was in retrograde. I was actually born in the planetary hour of Mercury when it was in retrograde. And the author always finds these periods quite difficult, perhaps because they work in Mercury-ruled publishing. So if you have a job as an editor, writer, sportscaster, television person, then it's going to be pretty strange, of course. You can find out if you were born into these phases by checking your natal horoscope wheel. The planet's Mercury symbol will have a small R under it on the horoscope wheel. People born under this phase are said to have philosophical and reflective natures that help them think through complex concepts quite creatively. Never worry about having a baby during one of these retrograde periods. It's always a good time to have a child, according to this person. Mercury's impending shadow period. Okay, so this is pretty important to this whole discussion. As Mercury approaches a switch point, the day it actually turns retrograde, it will progress along a path that it will retrace in the sky over the next few weeks. These 2 or 3 week period prior to Mercury retrograde is called the impending shadow period. We were talking about that earlier when everything's cooking up. If you initiate anything important during that shadow period, that is, in the time before Mercury begins to retrograde, you still may encounter problems. If you have a choice whether to sign papers or initiate an action prior to Mercury retrograde, or just after it finished retrograding, there is no question that I suggest you wait and act afterward. Try to secure a little breathing space, a few days, or even better, 2 weeks from the date Mercury goes direct. For safety, it doesn't pay to rush to do things before Mercury retrogrades. Waiting is always the wiser answer. That's what we're going to garner from this article. It was a pretty decent article written by a very good astrologer. So, one thing to keep in mind is that Mercury retrograde isn't always a bad thing. It may definitely be a time to, anytime any planet goes into retrograde, it's a good time to maybe duck and cover. It's a good time to maybe keep your head down. It's a good time to pay attention. So now that we know that we're armed with this information, we know what to look for. We know that the element of the sign that Mercury is passing through in retrograde is also important and a way to prepare yourself. Then maybe we can avoid some of these pitfalls and we can be a little bit more prepared. Like I said earlier, Mercury is in retrograde